Hey everyone, welcome to Product Momentum. I'm Sean Murray, Director of Product Management here at ITX.
And I'm Dan Sharp, a Product Manager at ITX. It's our privilege to continue the Product Momentum journey, a platform that celebrates the thinkers and doers who are shaping the future of software development.
That's right, Dan. Our goal is to introduce you to industry leaders, innovators, and practitioners, and bring you their insights, advice, and innovations. We talk with experts from product strategy, UX research and design, security, engineering, leadership, and more. We'll discuss how their approaches to problems help empower teams and build trust. And we'll explore trends, tools, and techniques that your team can use to deliver the software solutions your users need today. So tune in, stay curious, and join the conversation.
You can catch us on your favorite listening platform, or if you prefer the video experience, you can find all our latest episodes on the Product Momentum YouTube channel.
And if you like what you hear, be sure to subscribe, like, comment, and share. That way, we can be sure to provide you with the best podcast experience.
Sean, we just had a fantastic conversation with Michelle Parsons. She has a wealth of product experience, especially with strategy, big bets, balancing it out against kind of working your core area.
Yeah.
What'd you have?
Feels like she's done it all, but the big thing for the conversation is big bets are back.
They are.
Right? AI can take a little bit of a back seat today. We're going to talk about bets with Michelle. She's got a great framework for us to learn from. Really excited for everybody to hear this episode.
Let's do it.
Let's get it.
We are here live at Industry the Product Conference with Michelle Parsons. Michelle is a product leader who has been at Kayak, Spotify, Netflix. In fact, I was today years old when I learned that she was a product lead for Netflix Kids, a critical part of Weekends in the Sharp household.
Mm-hmm.
Currently, she is a co-founder and chief product officer at Lex, a community building platform in the LGBTQ plus space, doing a lot of awesome work. So welcome to the pod.
Thanks for having me.
We really loved your talk today. One of the benefits of us recording right after your talk is that we get to ask you questions about the stuff that we wanted to dive more into. The balanced portfolio framework. We are big fans of frameworks because it's a way to repeat action, right? We do also subscribe to all models are wrong, but some models are useful. So let's talk about not how it's wrong, but let's talk about how it's going to be useful. So tell us about the balanced portfolio framework.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's a framework that I started to devise and implement during my time at Netflix, really. I think that a lot of the work that I was doing there had to be very nimble. I mean, I started at Netflix when there wasn't a product leader in the space for a year plus. The team had spent the previous couple of years focusing on discovery products. And so how do we help kids discover new shows and new movies faster? Especially you think about the time that Netflix, when I was there, it was pre-streaming wars. So Disney Plus didn't exist, but we knew the horizon. And so, Netflix had just invested, I think, $30 million in a new kids slate of content. And I think it was very difficult for them to compete against, the big marketing budgets of these big studios who typically have a bunch of IP behind them. They have huge marketing budgets already because they're going to go into theaters, et cetera. And Netflix has a subscription, and so I had to find a way for our team to be able to validate and get access to resource investment. And so I started thinking through, what can I actually do on this roadmap with the amount of people that I have right now? And how do I create buy-in? How do I create excitement around the opportunity that I clearly see here in the kids space and the future opportunity I see, especially with Disney Plus looming and all these other platforms about to be on the horizon? And not to mention, when you think about the buying power that a kid actually has, and both of you have kids.
Yep.
Kids, you know that, when push comes to shove, if there's a service or a platform that's providing value to both me and my kid versus one that's providing value to just me, I'm probably more likely to retain. And our data did show this as well. And so the balanced portfolio framework basically breaks up features and product work or roadmap into three different categories. It is your big bets. These are the things that everyone wants to work on, right? When you think about products, people were like, yeah, I'm going to work on that amazing, big, innovative feature. The thing that really brings your strategy to life. And these are oftentimes really risky. They come with a ton of unknowns. There hasn't been proof points yet. They probably take a lot of time. They probably take a lot of teams. And so there are all these constraints around them that make them exciting. And if they work, super impactful, but really, really risky.
Okay.
And so then we have these other two categories of work that I kind of coined quick hits. And a quick hit really is a learning task, like not to be confused by a quick win. Oftentimes it can also be quick wins. That's great. But quick hits to me are really this body of work that is discreetly tied to a hypothesis or a data point that you want to prove out further. And that ladders right back into the conglomerate of hypotheses that are oftentimes associated with these big bets, right? There's not just one hypothesis I have when I'm thinking about a really big innovative feature. It's a lot of data, it's a lot of hypotheses. And so how can I pick apart that into its smallest component to try and validate and test out that idea? And how do I do that with the toolkit, I say, that's already available to me? I'm going to talk about an example of this as well. And this other body of work is really what I kind of consider like the meat, the meat and potatoes of your roadmap. It's really about the optimizations, the enhancements, the things that you already have inside that will work. It is the things that create incremental impact consistently for your users. It makes your product better. It makes your product more delightful. It touches on the macro metrics like retention and engagement and delight and MAU and DAU and all those types of things that perhaps that I often was telling somebody down in the audience today when we were speaking after the talk, that these are the things that sometimes, when your designers talk about that big feature and you say, yeah, let's do that. And then you go to your engineers and you roadmap it out and they're like, well, we can only do 80% of it. You go to your designer, they're like, we can only do this part. And they're like, ugh, we're never going to get back to the other 20%, are we? That is when you start to invest and harvest on those pieces where you're like, hey, we told you that if this actually worked, we would go back and invest the additional 20% if it made sense for us to do so. And that's where you start to build up both the trust in your team, your direct team, and also creating better product. And then you use these other two categories to really create that momentum, that buy-in, that de-risking really of those big impactful things that everyone wants to work on.
I love that. So, lot to unpack.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you're right. The idea of like kind of the meat potatoes work there of building, and building on your existing core functionality. That's super cool. And then, having the quick hits being a way of just learning the unknowns of the big bet and trying to make it less risky. That's super cool. So what advice then would you have for kind of product managers, working on these teams? Maybe they're assigned a big bet and they're trying to stick the landing. Like, how can they refine their hypotheses?
Yeah, no, I think I will always go back to this, and I have people who I've managed in the past who are working on really meaty features. I mean, even at Lex, when we were thinking through, like we wanted to transition our platform from a dating app style app to more of a social app, and how do we think about that? And we had this idea around this groups feature. And groups was kind of our big swing. We said, hey, if we made it really easy for people to create, join, and engage in groups, that we would actually have a shot at creating a community here beyond just like this like transactional moment. Um, but building that entire groups feature came with a lot of extra things. We had to create an algorithm. We had to create a bunch of tagging for our groups that didn't exist. We had to create a better creation flow, a join flow, all these different things. And so before we even got started on all that, and I do think the one thing to note here is like, it's not helpful to go and tackle a bunch of quick hits until you actually know what you want to build as that big swing, as that innovation thing. You need to know what are your hypotheses, what are the metrics that you're looking for, why are you doing this thing, and what's the vision of this end product. So we designed out the entire product of this groups feature that we were building out, groups discovery, groups explore, we called it. And then we said, okay, what's the one thing that needs to be true for this to actually work? And it was, we need to know whether people actually want to join and create groups. And so how do we do that? Well, we made it super simple. We focused actually on the create flow. We already had the ability to create chats and create group chats. It was just really cumbersome. So we simplified that flow. And then we already had in our product the ability to post. So you could create posts, and that's how people were discovering the groups that were created. There was no like fancy discovery, no fancy tagging, nothing. But we said, what if we automatically, because the person's already created the group, what if we automatically generate them a post about their group and auto post it? And if we can decrease the friction or time it takes to create a group and get people to join your group, does it actually improve our group's engagement metrics, but also our overall retention and our overall daily active users? And that did. And then so from there, we were able to say, okay, let's now invest in a proper discovery. And what does that take? And so we didn't jump right into that. There were a couple other steps that had to come along the way. Like we need to be able to tag our groups, right? So we need to know whether this group is about sports or is it about identity or is it about X, Y, or Z, so that we can actually create then a discovery moment that is actually matching that user's intent. And so when I talk to, folks who come to me or just general advice, it's you need to have the understanding of what you're trying to build and why. That's number one. Number two, like you really have to understand what metrics you're trying to drive. Again, and why. I'm always going to say why. Like, why does it matter? Because you need to be able to articulate why, because sometimes that will uncover different things for you. And then thirdly, like once you have an understanding of what you're building and who it's being built for, understanding of your core hypotheses and your core metrics, then distill that down and try to uncover what is the biggest unknown that we have here that we might be able to ship out quickly. And in our case, for that groups example, we already had this flow to create groups. Can we do that faster? Does that enable more people to create groups? And therefore, does that create more joins, right? So you have more groups, potentially as a user, then you might have something that might interest you. And so those are the things that I oftentimes think through is just get down to that core hypothesis and learning and find things in your arsenal that already exist that you can leverage so you cut down the time of actual development and learning.
Did you use like the concept like a pre-mortem in those flows, like where you've kind of figured out, okay, this is where we want to go. Okay, like where are all the ways that this can go wrong? So
Yeah, and I think it's like it's less about like where can it go wrong and more so like what don't we know right now, right? Like if my goal is to get people to we had a hypothesis that if people joined more groups, that groups was going to be a highly retentive action because what we had as our core metric for our business, which was connections. We believe that connections, if users created connections, they get the aha moment, the ROI of our app faster, more often, they would retain, they would tell other people to join, and that's kind of how we would fuel our growth. And well, you think about a group, you join a group, you're immediately added from an interest perspective, value, belief, whatever the case might be, to a bunch of other people who share that similarity. And then rather than having to make a one-on-one message arbitrarily or put a post out there that can feel really scary, you're now with people who are all interested in like queer book clubs. And so getting started to make that first connection becomes a whole lot easier. And so for us, it was really just about trying to figure out whether even that idea was right, right? Is connections actually ladders up to our goal of retention and active users and ultimately monetization? And the answer was yes. And so then you can go and invest in that further.
cool. I feel like you're in the process of de-risking your big bet. You're also coming up with solutions to de-risk activities for people and make them feel comfortable.
Well,
with the
exactly.
thing.
Yeah.
Really cool.
Precisely.
I first want to say thank you for talking about bets today, because I feel like 14 to 16 months ago, all we were talking about was bets. That was like the thing to talk about at that time. And now all we're talking about is AI, I feel like, every day. So it was like, yes, we're talking about, yes, bets was still cool. Okay. Bets was still cool. Back to strategy vision. How are we gonna push the business
Well,
forward?
I mean, I'd love to just like tap on this because I think it would, be silly for me not to mention AI at least once.
Contractually obligated. You did it.
Anything just for SEO, right? She said AI. Uh, but I think that actually in the age of AI, where really like you can actually get to a prototype, you can get to, I mean, like Figma Make, you're able to basically create our end-to-end designs so much faster than with no skill set in design, right? You can get to a bunch of your ideas more rapidly. Like, the thing that you cannot hack and that really AI cannot get is intuition. They can't get to like good ideas grounded in insight and data and that just product sense, right? So I really think it becomes more critical actually now to think through, where are my hypotheses?
Mm.
What data am I trying, what metric, what data am I trying to actually move and why? And the why becomes so much more critical because the what then becomes a bit more democratized. And so then it really becomes an exercise in, can I actually get back to really sharp strategic thinking, user empathy, and try to actually come up with a reason why I'm building this thing in the first place. And we often talk about, I hear this sometimes of like, my exec wants me to build this AI thing. We don't know what it is, but we have to have something AI on the roadmap for XYZ or, XYZ reason. Why? Is a user going to actually benefit from this, or is it just for a press piece, right? That you're going to invest all this time in and then ultimately no one's ever going to use. And so I think that, it's an interesting kind of question, I think, to bring back up. It's like, yes, AI does enable so much, and it also then accentuates the needs for some of the basic product characteristics and kind of product skills.
That doesn't replace critical thought.
Yeah,
Right.
precisely.
You mentioned when talking about quick hits and small bets today, you mentioned actually talking about doubling down on things that we know that people love, right? And actually, it was the second time today. Our friend from Peloton talked about doubling down on things that people love. Why are we starting to hear more about that? Like people revisiting that concept of mm, you have to push the business forward, but you also still need to focus on the things that people love and people and at work today.
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's probably a multitude of answers to this question. I think my perspective on this is twofold. The first is you want to continue to please your users, and I think I've worked at companies that have always like really focused on like user joy and user love. Netflix and Spotify and Hinge, but these products are really products that people they find love in. They love the brands, they like love the stories, they like love what the product can do for them. And I think that, in a way you want people to have a connection to your product. I think that like for a long time, like, there's this concept that, like, brands didn't matter anymore because there was no more brand loyalty, and so, like, all the time spent in, like, the years of, like, Coca-Cola and all these, like, Nike and all these brands, like, building these, like, cult followings around. It didn't matter anymore because the social media cycles were so fast that people could fall in and fall out of trends as fast as, blinking their eyes. And so I think that when you think about actually how costly it is to acquire a user, that becomes really critical. How do I find the things that my users actually are extracting value from, that they actually love, that are providing that aha moment to them? Double down on those and continue to make those things really easy because we know then that those are going to produce incremental impact, incremental gains. And that's fine. So long as like over the course of the year, you can say like, yeah, we actually made a 10% impact, even if that big bet that you took failed, right? At least you're not coming out with zero.
Right.
And so I think it's really important then for us to be thinking about, let's improve the product in all ways. And delight is a way to improve the product. And at Netflix, actually, we spent time focused on delight. And our leadership was like, why are we working on that? No one's gonna care. And it's like, but think about kids and think about what actually makes a kid tick.
Right.
You know, delight is 80% of it. So
Right. At least.
at least. And so, we spent some time like creating a brand new like wipe when Netflix Kids profile opened, and a little cute sound and song that was like specific to that profile. But there was a reason why we did that. Because we wanted kids to start to like associate their profile with them. Because let's talk about it. I mean, recommendations are critical for Netflix, right? For Netflix, for Spotify, you have this whole thing on year in review where people are like, my sleep music ruined my year review, my kids' music ruined my year in review. The same thing is happening for parents' profiles. A parent was just like, whatever, I need to get this show on for my kid. They were doing it in their profile, and then their recommendations are so tainted, right? And so you're getting like a Coco Melon and a True and a Breaking Bad all on the same line, and you're like, what's happening here, right? And so you want to get that association with the kid, like, hey, this is mine. I want this, and not only that, but it starts to build brand loyalty over time. Why is Disney so powerful? Disney is so powerful because each one of us can remember a Disney movie from when we were a kid, and we have nostalgia that then brings that back when we get Moana 2 or the newest remake of The Lion King, and we're like, yeah, I can still tap back into that like heart moment. And those things are really hard to like disconnect from our again, it comes back to attention into dollars, right? It's really hard to disassociate that. And so those are the things I think oftentimes we can put on the back burner because the proof points aren't as clear. But I think it's like our responsibility to start to try and make those cases and use the arsenal and the tools that we do have at our disposal to make those connections and draw those lines. So,
Yeah. When you talk about a segment that's going to have brand loyalty, it's going to be children, right? And
right.
as people who rely on the third parent to take care of our kids sometimes, right? I think that's just a great insight about why you double down on kids. Um, how do you think that we should be balancing like big bets, small bets, quick hits? What's the best way when we are actually communicating up? How do we actually talk about these things with our company leaders, right? A lot of when we think about the demographic of our listeners in our podcast, we're talking about people who are going to need to communicate these changes up. So what's the best way to do that? What's the best way to do that?
And I brought this up very briefly in my talk that I think that storytelling is oftentimes a very underrated skill set when thinking through how you present information up. I think that yes, I can say like create a balanced portfolio of an 80-20 mix. But like what I really think is critical is like having that rationale behind why something is where it is on the roadmap. And I think that storytelling really helps bring this to life. And I think as product managers, like that should be one of our key skill sets because ultimately like our job is to empathize with our users and also empathize with everybody across and up and down. And our leadership are our users in the capacity. They're people who are also responding to their own, whether it's their board or their executive team or whomever they might be. They have to go and create buy-in as well. Like everybody up some chain is creating buy-in. And if you get to the highest level, it's from the executives to the investors, right? So like to shareholders. And so you really have to think through how am I going to sell this thing in a way that helps bring clarity to the problems that I'm solving, the metrics that we're hoping to move. And oftentimes that should be a metric that's tied to your business goals and your user goals. And, if those two things aren't very crystal clear, like spend time working on that. And I had to spend some time at Hinge working on like, how do you tie your company level metrics to your business level, to your company level, to like the individual team level to say, yeah, um, increasing like the quality of likes is actually going to increase monetization, right? Draw that through line. And so I think it becomes really critical to start to create that story and showcase not just here are the metrics and here's the revenue gain, but put real, tangible experience around that. Like, hey, actually, people come to our site and they see profiles that they want to spend a little bit extra time reviewing because they're interesting, because they have more depth about a person, because they're not just like photos that are very formulaic. It's not all just homogenous. It's not just text and photo, but it becomes more dynamic and it tells a better story of who this person uniquely is. If I spend, you know, an extra 30 seconds reviewing a profile to give an answer, whether yes or no, that's 30 more seconds than I spent on the previous app or whatever else is out there. That's actually able then to lead me then to a stronger signal. And that stronger signal then downstream has impact on, you know, the quality of matches, the comments, the chats, the dates. And I think being able to tie those things together on like why is a better profile important beyond just the, like it's going to increase X. It's going to do all these other things for the way that people feel about coming into this product too.
Right.
And tying those two things together, I think, is really critical.
So I can always shift gears because you're one of the few product people, that I get a chance to talk to who's taking a product like you did Lex and taking it from being a dating app into a community space, like kind of having that inflection. I think like most product managers, right? You work on a product and it stays that product. So I'm just really kind of curious, how how you came to that point, like how you kind of shepherded the group through that as a product leader.
Yes, I mean, I think that there's a couple of things here. Is like one is like the founder of Lex, was very much like entrenched in the queer community. She actually started the original the original idea and concept for Lex came from an Instagram page that just kind of got a cult following, and it was a very much personal style ad, and really built upon what people love, which is dating and hookups and all this stuff. Like they say that kind of stuff sells. Um, and over time, there's just so much of a response and appetite for it that, she wanted to start an app, and so she raised a Kickstarter. Ultimately, our co-founder, Jen, and myself came in, and what started happening is they started seeing people hacking the product. It was a product that was basically like almost like, think of like a old school, like, personal style, like Craigslist style. You posted an ad, you posted a little prompt of something you were looking for, and people would respond to it. There's no profile pictures, nothing, just text. Really meant to be more intentional. Like, you have to actually state what you're interested in, what you want. Um, and that really started to evolve naturally into, well, it's also like times are changing. It's COVID. It's the middle of COVID. People can't go out. People are, stuck inside. They're looking for more than just dating. They're looking for like friends and for like community in a way, right? That was kind of gone. And so they started posting just like things like, "Hey, I have extra sourdough starters. Anyone want? Hey, who wants to take a walk on Prospect Park?" And so we saw all those signals and then started to say, "Hey, there's opportunity here." It was super scary. It was super risky. But we said there is probably more longevity in this product and company if we expand beyond this one use case. 'Cause one, this use case is very crowded. It is it's really hard to be unique in this space because, again, the form factor of photo and swiping is pretty much standard, and so to do anything outside the box becomes an exercise in futility a little bit. Like, there have been some parts that have made it work, but there is a very unique angle that they're taking to do so. And so, for us, we also, like, was looking at the environment. Dating trends are changing. Like, Gen Z is dating less. They want to have more understanding of who a person is. They want to connect on interests. They want to start out as friends. They're drinking less. All these different things that made it say, like, to us, like, especially within the LGBTQ plus community, there's a gap here. And we want to solve this. We really think about creating local community. And that can evolve and morph into whatever people want it to be. Friends, roommates, physicians, and potential relationships. And so I think that was a critical pivot moment that we had to make, and a risk. We did have some of our early users who were very upset about it.
Sure.
But I think that we had to make the decision to say, we understand it's going to make some of our early users who are really into this particular aspect of the app upset. But the future of this business, the future, the potential of this community far outweighs that.
Yeah. Like, yeah, so your big bet's just having the courage to, like, listen to a new signal and go in a different direction.
Yeah. Well, I'd like to thank Mrs. Murray for locking me down before dating apps were a thing. So I have like I have no context for anything
love it.
anything related to swiping, right? This has been an awesome conversation. Thank you for being with us today. What is next for you and next for Lex?
Yeah, so amazing. Lex is we're continuing to trek on. I am actually, I think I mentioned to you, I'm going to be starting a new company focused at the intersection of astrology and spirituality and kind of coaching or talk therapy. So we're really thinking through, like, as again, comes back to community, comes back to us wanting to, like, create and have answers about the past, the future, the present, and how all these things are aligned, and really reimagine like today's astrology apps that exist, which are very monodirectional. It's like they give me a horoscope, and how do you create a bi-directional like conversation around these like very meaty topics that I might not have a community to talk to about. And I might want a little bit more than just like my friend's advice who is also struggling with the exact same thing I'm struggling with, right? It's like, how do I put a bit more contextualization when maybe I don't want to like lean into other types of um systems or structures, right? So like this is something that we're excited about. Yeah, and so I'm excited to kind of kick this off and see what comes of it.
Awesome. Awesome. Love it. Building community. It's
Yeah.
really awesome.
All right. The last thing we always ask our guests is, what are you reading right now?
Oh, wow. I mean, just in the typical sense of like I am reading novels, listening. I'm not a big like reader. I read too slow. My brain is like, what did I just read? So I listen to a lot of audiobooks. But I'm reading Leading with Heart right now, which is just like I think that like through our careers we go through ups and downs, and I think that we're always learning. I think that every single person probably like looked back on her and like, I wish I would have handled that differently, or darn, like. And I think that authenticity is something that I think I've always like, be more authentic. You get sometimes, or be more, not more authentic, just like more open and vulnerable. That's the word. And it's just like, I need to figure out how to do that in a context that creates a bridge between like my work life and my personal life. And I think that, especially being a queer woman from a single mom household, like who grew up in South Texas, who's half Hispanic, like it's sometimes easier said than done to be like, be as vulnerable as possible, right? When you're like, there are so many things that like sometimes you are scared of, right? How will people perceive you? How will that impact like your ability to like get a promotion or do X, Y, or Z? And so I think that my like general goal of like the past like several years has just been like, how do I think through like the bridge between like who I am in and out of work and draw greater like synergy and connection towards those things. And that's why I've been trying to work on products and features and just do things that I feel like way more aligned, like soul wise, um, that still leverage my skill set of like being awesome at products.
That's great. While you were on the talk shop stage, I looked at Dan and I said, "This is going to be the easiest podcast ever," and I think it was. So
Amazing.
thank you for being
Yeah.
great. Thank you for being with us today.
Awesome. Thanks for having me.